want us today to have a heart of thankfulness. I want to tell you today, I want to honor Thanksgiving weekend by having a heart of gratitude because we are not naturally grateful people. If we could just be honest, we're not. And so I want to be thankful today. I'm thankful for my wife, Becky. I'm thankful for our kids. I'm thankful for this church. I'm thankful that we have a place to come to, a church that has a heart and a mission to do whatever it takes for all people, no matter where you've been, no matter your race, your nationality, your economic bringing, your religious background, the way that you vote, for all people to follow Jesus, to grow in their relationship with Jesus, and to live their lives for Jesus. I'm thankful that we have a group of people that show up every single week to serve us. They come to serve you. Did you notice the men in the parking lot today? They were out there getting covered in rain to help you park your cars today. Do you have some appreciation for those men today that did that today for you? How about those that are watching your kids right now who aren't in the service? Many of them miss the service every single week to serve your kids. Come on, let them know, let them hear for just a moment. How about our student leaders who show back up here on Sunday nights when you're at home watching football to take care of your teenager, right? Who you sent off because you didn't want to deal with for the night, right? Let them hear for just a moment. Tell them how much you appreciate them. Your grow group leaders that show up every single week prepared so that you can spend time learning more about God and growing your relationship with God, who encourage you, who pray for you, who care about you, right? I'm thankful for our church. Thankful that we have a heart of generosity because all the things that we talk about, even in this season, about how we want to shock the world with the hope and love of Jesus, it is only made possible if we grow a heart of generosity, right? And so we talk about opportunities to be able to be part of things like the angel tree. 300 opportunities this year to sponsor an angel. Came in this morning, we have less than 30 opportunities left for you to grab an angel, which is absolutely unbelievable at this point in the season to only have 30 angels left. Can we just give God a round of applause? So if you haven't grabbed an angel today, let's go ahead and get that cleaned up today. Take care of that. Grab an angel on your way out. You can do that online. There's a link on our website or through our app as well that you can sponsor a child. Let's go ahead and get those last few kids sponsored, right? It's amazing, right? So we've been talking about is we want to shock the world with generosity. Why? Because the world is not naturally grateful and the world is not naturally generous. But why we want to shock the world with gratitude and generosity so we can point people to the hope of Jesus. Why are we grateful? Why are we generous? Because of Jesus. Because there's something different about our lives. We want the world to see in us that there's something different how we live our lives. So we've been talking a lot about the heart in this season. We've been talking about a physical heart and a spiritual heart, how they're one and the same. How every physical heart has a healthy inflow to outflow to overflow, and that's how we live our life. We talked about spiritually, how we're supposed to have a healthy inflow of God's truth and God's word and God's purity. In a world of sin, in a world of chaos, in a world of upside down thinking, right? We have to have a healthy dose of God's truth permeating deep into our hearts. We believe that we have an outflow to the lungs physically, but we believe the lungs spiritually represent the Spirit of God who breathes life into us. Also, we can have that inflow to outflow to a healthy overflow. That's what we're called to live as followers of Jesus, in the overflow of our life, where God's truth has permeated so deep into our hearts, right? Where the Spirit of God has breathed life on us, and now everything we come in contact with is different. That's how we're supposed to live this life. As a follower of Jesus, people are supposed to rub up against you and see something different about you. You're supposed to open your mouth and something comes out that's different than the world. This is how we shock the world, with how we live our lives on fire for the things of God. But what happens? In our lives, just like our physical hearts, our spiritual hearts get blockages, don't they? They get things that kind of get in there and they begin to block the flow. We talked last week about one of those heart diseases that get into our heart is this issue of greed. It's one of those things that we don't see in ourselves. We see it in other people. We're quick to notice it. But greed sets in, and what happens is greed stops the flow. We begin to hoard God's blessings. All these things are coming in, and they don't go out. And what happens is that we don't get to live the life fully the way that God has called for us to live this life. So we said, don't stop the flow. Turn to somebody right now and say, don't stop the flow. Come on, turn to somebody, don't stop the flow of mine. Don't stop the flow. Don't stop the flow. We're so quick to hold on to it. We have this idea in our head of what that blessing is that we want, that thing that we're chasing after, and then we get it and we hold on to it. I want to talk to you today about another heart disease that sets in, that's so easy to set in, and one that we don't easily recognize. But many of us, if we could be honest, we live daily with this heart disease. And when we do, what it is, it's a direct insult to the heart of God himself. Now, I went back a few days ago and I was looking at some old studies, just kind of prepping for this message, getting ready. And I noticed that years ago, they had done a study on my generation. My generation is known as the millennial generation. I'm right on the very front end of that. I was born in 1980. And so 1980 to 1995 or 96 is what they call the millennial generation. And they began to do some research on one word that would describe the millennial generation. And as they did some research, they came up with this word, and it starts with the letter E. And so what they did is they circled back around and they began to interview people, asking them what word would describe the millennial generation that starts with the letter E. And people said energetic. People said excellent. People said empathetic. You know what the word was? What was the word? The word was entitlement. The millennial generation is an entitled generation. My generation is known as the entitled generation. And if you're the older generation, you're like, bunch of spoiled brats. But you know what? Every generation has a title. Who spoiled those brats? The baby boomer generation. You know what the baby boomer generation's title is? It's the generation of divorce and abandonment. That's the title. So what happened? Baby boomer generation went to work, made a bunch of money. They were kids who didn't have a lot. They came from a generation there wasn't a whole lot around. And so what happened? They went to work, they made some money, and since they were gone all the time and divorce had set in our country, what it is, they said, well, to make up for it, we'll just buy our kids whatever they want. Because don't you know, every good parent never says no to their kids. That's what good parents do. They spoil their kids rotten. And so to overcompensate for the emotion of just the absence in the home or maybe the physical separation of a relation in the home, what happened is we just spoiled kids. And so before we're quick to blame one generation, we have to look within ourselves, right? Every generation's got issues. But I would tell you that entitlement is not just a generational thing. Entitlement is really a cultural thing, something that we have always struggled with in our culture. It is so easy for us to find ourselves in a world today, no matter what generation you fall in, to have this mindset that what we have isn't enough. You ever said that before? If I just had more of whatever, then I would be happy. What I have isn't good enough. It's not enough. And see what happens in our life when we find ourselves, especially as followers of Jesus, saying that what we have isn't enough. What you are saying audibly is that what God has blessed you with isn't enough. In essence, God isn't good enough. God as your provider isn't enough. And so this is a direct insult to the heart of God. What you're saying is, God, what you have given me, what you provided me with, it isn't enough. And so we often overlook what God has blessed us with because we live with the heart disease of ungratefulness. Anybody here honest enough to say you've ever been ungrateful before? Anybody ever been grateful? You ever taken for granted what you have, the things around you? It's so easy in our culture to be so driven towards that thing that we want that we miss out on what we actually have, right? We've been walking through the Gospels together, looking at just some of Jesus' teachings. And I want to talk to you about a very specific moment today in Luke chapter 17, of a moment where there were some men who show us this heart of ungratefulness. If you have a Bible, you can go ahead and get to Luke chapter 17. We're going to be in verses 11 through 18. And it says this, it says, now on his way to Jerusalem, Jesus traveled along the border between Samaria and Galilee. As he was going into a village, 10 men who had leprosy met him, and they stood at a distance. And they called out in a loud voice, Jesus, Master, have pity on us. So during this day, there was a kind of a rare disease. It was called leprosy. Leprosy is a disease that attacks the nerves in the body. And what happens is your nerves begin to die and decay. And so what happens over time is that literally your digits begin to decay and fall off. It's a very contagious disease. And so if you had leprosy during this day, you've probably heard of leper colonies. The reason why there were leper colonies is because you were dismissed from being around regular people. You were sent outside the city gates and you were meant to be out there. No one will let you come inside. In fact, if you were a leper and you came inside the city gates, they would yell at you, unclean, unclean. They throw rocks at you and they would stone you to death. So if you were a leper, basically you were sentenced to death. You were just sent outside. So these men are outside of the city gates, not allowed in. And there are so many spiritual implications we can draw from this. So much of the heart of the church, right? There are so many people who maybe feel like they're lepers because maybe they aren't part of the church. They feel like they've been outcasts because of their sin, their past, their mistakes, because of the sickness of sin within themselves. And the church has probably done a really good job of saying, unclean, unclean. Look at you, you dirty sinner. You're not welcome here, right? And so we gotta be very cautious. And so Jesus is walking into town. He sees these 10 lepers. And it says, and when he saw them, he said, go show yourselves to the priests. And as they went, they were cleansed. So Jesus just yells back to them and says, hey guys, just go to the priest. And on their way, walking in faith, it says that Jesus heals them and they're cleansed. And verse 15, it says one of them, everybody say one. One of them, when he saw he was healed, came back praising God in a loud voice. He threw himself at Jesus' feet and he thanked him. And he was a Samaritan. And Jesus asked a really important question. Were not all 10 cleansed? In other words, where are the other 9? Why did only one of you show up? Was no one found to return and give praise to God except this foreigner? He's in Galilee, right? So you got 9 locals, you got a Samaritan who's a foreigner, and only one of them returns to give thanks to God. Only one of them returns with a posture of gratitude and humility to worship Jesus for what he's done for him. Now, I don't think these guys were trying to be jerks to Jesus. I don't think they do. I think they were so excited they'd been healed and set free that they wanted to go see family or friends they hadn't seen before. But what happens is they don't stop and acknowledge what Jesus has done for them. You know what it tells me a little bit? That maybe they live with an attitude of entitlement. Because maybe they've been sick for so long, they've been outcast for so long, they had dealt with this condition for so long, they had prayed for so long, they had waited for that relationship for so long, they had waited for that promotion for so long, they had waited for that bonus for so long, that once they got it, it was like it's about time. And they just began to live with it. You ever been there before? Well, I deserve this. I've been working hard. I've been waiting. I've been praying. I've been doing all the things spiritual I need to do. I've been checking all the boxes. I deserve this. And in our posture of expecting, our posture of entitlement, how many times, just like these men, how we live with an ungrateful mindset, an ungrateful heart, with ungrateful heart disease. Now, I'm a parent of 4 kids. And I tell you one thing that I cannot stand is when my kids act entitled. Anybody else feel this way? Like, I'll do a lot with my kids and I'll put up with a lot. But the moment my kids start expecting me to do something, oh man, I mean, I'm literally like, get away from me. Don't even look at me. Don't ask me for anything. I'm not doing nothing for you, you spoiled little brat, right? When I gotta remind myself I spoiled them, right? It's on me. But when they start acting like they expect me to do something, they start treating me that way, man, I'm telling you, it does something emotionally to me, doesn't it? Because you know what? It's so easy to recognize entitlement in my kids. But how many times do I act like a spoiled brat to my spiritual father? I act the exact same way, and so do you. How many times has God given us something, or we come to him in prayer with this attitude of expectancy? I've been doing all this, God. I've been putting in all this work. I've been living this way. I've been honoring you. I deserve this. I deserve better. I deserve more. Ungratefulness is an insult to the heart of God. When we don't live in a posture of thankfulness, a posture of worship, a posture of gratitude, we are audibly saying to God what's in our heart, we are not grateful for what you've done, because what you've done isn't enough. Listen, I don't know what these other 9 lepers were thinking. Regardless, 9 of them run off and they never come back and thank Jesus. Now, before we dogpile on these 9 ungrateful lepers, I want us to think how many of us would have come back. How many of us who have been outcast, who have been distant from God, who've been maybe distant from our family member, our spouse, our kids, our first thought would have been to run back to God. How many of us would have moved on from our life without ever the thought of thanking Jesus for what he did? I want to ask you this question this morning, and it's a question that you're going to have to wrestle with. And it's this question right here: will I be the one? This is the question you have to wrestle with today. Will I be the one? Will you be the one who pauses daily to thank Jesus for the blessings that are in your life? Will I be the one that returns daily with a posture of gratitude, that pauses and thanks God for the blessings that I have in my life, who looks around and sees all that I have, and I thank God and I take note of what he's done and who he is? Will I be that one every day that stops in the busyness of life to thank God for my family, to thank God for my kids, to thank God for your spouse, to thank God for your job, your boyfriend, your girlfriend, who stops long enough to thank God for the blessings that are around me? Will I be the one who stops and has a posture of worship and gratitude and humility and thankfulness? Will I have a heart that's truly grateful for what I have? Will I stop long enough to show somebody my gratefulness? I mean, when's the last time we stopped and just told someone how thankful we were for them? Even outside of our relationship with Jesus. When's the last time you went to your boss and said, I'm so thankful that I have a job here? We hate our bosses, don't we? Unless you work at Hope Church. We love the boss at Hope Church. We're like, well, we hate, we live with this ungrateful mentality, right? It's never, and when's the last time you just thanked your kids? My kids don't deserve anything. Thank God. I prayed for these kids. Isn't it true so often that we ask God to take away the exact thing that we would have called an answered prayer 5 or 10 years ago? God, give me this job. God, give me that bonus. God, give me that car. God, give me that house. God, the house is killing us. These kids are killing us. The job's too much, right? And all of a sudden now we're asking God to alleviate from us the exact thing we called a blessing so many years ago. Why? Because we lose sight of so much. God, I'm thankful. When's the last time we acknowledged, we sent an email, we hand wrote a card in our culture that just said, thank you, I'm thankful for you. I appreciate you, I appreciate what you've done. Will you be the one? Will you choose today to be the one who is willing to be thankful with a heart of gratitude to who God is and what God's placed in your life? Or will you be someone who thinks you just deserve it, that I'm entitled to it? Will you be like the other 9 who just believed they deserved to be healed and that God didn't need to be thanked because they had lived with us for so long? They deserve to finally be set free and healed. Will you be one who's so busy that you can't stop and even acknowledge what you're thankful for? Because I don't have enough time in my day to even stop and thank God. Think about that. Think about how crazy that is. I don't have enough time in the day to stop and even thank God for the blessings in my life, but I do have enough time to stop in the day to remind God of all the things he hasn't blessed me with. And I have plenty of time to complain to God, and I have plenty of time to throw up new requests to God, but I don't have any time to thank God for what God has placed in my life. Will you ask God today to help you be grateful? Will you ask God today to help you have a heart full of gratitude and gratefulness for what God has given you? See, I think if we're honest today, we all think that we live with grateful lives. But I believe if we're honest today, many of us live our lives ungratefully and we don't even realize it. I think our complaints so often, our negativity, just expose how ungrateful we are. Our first thought is to complain in most situations and circumstances. And complaining, again, is an indication of what's really in our heart. We complain, why? We complain because the service wasn't fast enough. The food wasn't hot enough. Our kids didn't perform at the level we thought they should enough. Our sports teams, if you're a Carolina fan yesterday, they did not do enough for me. You know what I'm saying? They failed me on 2 fronts yesterday, right? It's never enough, right? It's never good enough. And so at the heart, we expose that it's never quite enough for us. I want you to flip back 2 chapters to Luke chapter 15. I want to share with you an illustration that you're probably very familiar with. It's a story that Jesus tells about 2 boys. But I want to kind of give it to you from a different perspective today, because a lot of times we focus on this prodigal son who had ventured away from his father. But I want you really to focus on the heart disease of these 2 young boys as Jesus begins to really drive in this point about our heart, because this story is really an illustration about us and about God being our Father. And so I think as we read through this, we discover that we're one of these two boys. We can relate, we can compare ourselves to their story. So Luke chapter 15, Jesus is going to tell this parable. It begins in verse 11. It says, there was a man who had 2 sons. The young one said to his father, Father, give me my share of the estate now. Just stop right there. We're going to kind of give you 2 kind of distinct descriptions of what it means to have kind of this heart disease of ungratefulness. And the first thing you can write down today is this: when it comes to this ungrateful heart disease, number 1 is this, is that you want it now. I want it now. That's what we see with this young man. He comes to his father because during tradition and culture, this day and even today, you would never come to a parent or grandparent and say, I want my inheritance now. You got that inheritance after that person passed on. So this young man comes to his dad and says, hey dad, I haven't worked for much of anything in life. You've worked for all of it and you have some wealth now. And I want you right now to go ahead and pretend like you're dead and give me what I think I deserve right now. Give me my cut now. What a slap in the face of this father to have such disrespect for his dad that he would come and say, Dad, just go ahead and give. I don't even deserve it, but I feel I do. I'm entitled to it. So he'll go ahead and give me my entitlement now. Now again, it's so easy for us to dogpile on this young man, but I wonder how many of us have come to God with the same type of requests. I haven't put in the work. I haven't put in the effort spiritually. I haven't gotten on my knees. I haven't developed a foundation in my life, relationally, spiritually, financially. But God, give it to me now. I don't have the character to sustain it. I can't even keep hold of it, but God, just give it to me now, right? So this young man says. And so what happens? It tells us that his father, rich in grace and mercy, for whatever reason, gives his son his share of the inheritance. And it took him about 5 minutes to squander it, doesn't it? Read the story. So he went out and he began to squander it on wild living. Why? Because you never appreciate what you didn't work for. You never appreciate what you didn't earn. If he had worked for this and he would have earned it and it would have been his, he would have never squandered it this way. But he took something that he hadn't worked for because he had to have it now, and he begins to squander it. And that's what happens. If God just gave us everything we wanted now, then you and I wouldn't appreciate what God has given to us. And so God, loving us the way that he does, says, okay, you want to work for that? You want to develop that? You want to do work in your life? Let me see. Let me see some faith and obedience in your life. Let me see a season where you're willing to journey with me. Let me see some discipline in your life. Let me see some things that you're willing to do so while you can have a deeper appreciation so you won't squander what I've given to you, right? How many of us are so unaware of what God has given us? And so our unawareness of God's blessings causes us to squander what God has put around us. We squander marriages. We squander finances. We squander gifts and abilities. We squander relationships. We squander so much because we're unaware, because we don't live with a posture and an awareness of a gratefulness of what God is doing in our life. We see this want it now mentality all throughout our culture, don't we? It's the reason why we are the most in-debt society and culture in the world's history. And when I say that, everyone's like, yeah, we're just Americans. That's just the way it is. But why do we live that way? Because as Americans, we live with such an entitled mentality. The thought of waiting for something seems oblivious to us. Why would I wait? I can have it right now. I mean, what made Amazon so popular, right? It's because I can buy it now. The click of a button, I can have it now. We don't even think about it. Almost mindless, just press the button. How many of us every day we come home, there's packages all over the front. And I don't know about you, there are days like, I don't even remember what I ordered. Obviously, I didn't need it. I don't even know what's in the boxes. And we started opening them up, like, oh yeah, I ordered that a couple weeks ago. Oh yeah. And think about how easy we are to do that. eBay, what made eBay so popular was people love the bidding wars, but then eBay figured out that there are people who would spend more if they put a buy it now button. So what happens is people began to spend more because they didn't want to wait in the bidding wars where they could have got it less. I'll just buy it now. So again, we live in a world today that says, who cares? 39% interest for the next 20 years sounds like a great deal. Because I can get it today, pay for it tomorrow. Pay for it, pass it down to my kids. Doesn't matter. Why? Because we live this idea that I want it now. I gotta have it right now, no matter what. I'm dissatisfied, I struggle, I'll never have enough, it'll never be good enough. So I gotta have it now because that thing, that next thing will finally do it for me. It'll finally make me happy. So even if we can't afford it, even if we'll never have it, we go after it. Because we never really trust that maybe God could help us get to a place where it's sustainable. Maybe God could bless us with something. Maybe God could get us somewhere in life to move ahead, that God could actually get us to that place and give it to us as a blessing. Walk in faith and obedience, we discipline our lives, and maybe at the end, maybe it might take 5, 10, 15 years to get there, but God could get me there. No, forget all that. I want it now. Some of us are like the younger brother, I want it now. Some of us will relate to the older brother. In verse 29, it says this, look, all these years I've been slaving for you and never disobeyed your orders. Yet you never gave me even a young goat so I could celebrate with my friends. This is the older brother who sees what the younger brother has, and now he's upset. Heart disease number 2, you can write this down, is I deserve more. Here's the older brother, he looks at the younger brother and says, wait a second, Dad, hold on a minute. This guy got his cut early, right? And yet he went out and squandered it, threw it all away. And when he comes home, you throw a party for him. Well, don't I get something too? Don't I get something more? You didn't do that for me. I didn't even get a goat to have a party with my friends. And you killed the fattened calf for your rebelled, wayward child. I deserve something more. Now, what's the older brother lose sight of? The older brother lose sight that he's living in his father's house, eating from his father's table, has a job because his father has employed him. Yet he looks around and says, what I have isn't enough. I deserve something more. You ever been here before? I deserve more than what I have. I deserve more. They got that. I should have that. I deserve more. At the heart of it, I deserve a better job. I deserve a better spouse. I deserve better benefits. I don't have a good enough house. I need a better car. I need a better cell phone. I deserve more, 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 more. I deserve it. Why? Because I do. Why? Just because. How come? Because I'm entitled to it. I deserve it. I'm not gonna work for it. I want it now. Deserve more. I remember when I first began to drive, my parents had a third vehicle. And they came to me and they said, Tad, here's the deal. We have this third vehicle and you can drive this vehicle and we'll pay for the insurance. Car's already paid for. But if this isn't good enough for you, my parents were really abusive. They really hated me. And they were like, if this isn't good enough, you can go out, we'll help you get a loan. You'll have to get a job and you'll have to pay for your own car. Well, I was like, look, I'm not about to drive a Pontiac Bonneville. You know what I'm saying? Like, I deserve more than that. I deserve something better than that. I ain't about to drive an old beat up Pontiac Bonneville, right? There ain't no way in the world. And so my parents were like, okay, we'll go out and we'll help you get a loan. We'll co-sign on the loan. And you're gonna have to get a job. You don't have to get a job in high school, but if that's what you wanna do, that's on you, right? That's on you, Tad. Let me tell you, the first time you miss a payment, the car's ours. And the first time you get a speeding ticket, you're paying for your insurance. They were really brutal people. Well, it didn't take me but about 2 days to get my first speeding ticket. So they handed me my insurance bill, right? But it was this idea, right, that what they had for me wasn't enough. We're gonna bless you with the vehicle. Insurance paid for, already paid for. But what I said in my spirit is that's not good enough for me. I deserve something more, something better. Again, in like the first 2 weeks, I totaled the car that I had. You know what I mean? Like, they were smart. You could have totaled our Pontiac Bonneville and we would have been okay with that. But now you totaled your car that you paid for. You know what I mean? And like, you see the protection and provision, but you see the mentality that we so often live with, that it's never enough. Ungrateful heart disease. My prayer for you as we're talking together today, that you begin to identify in your own heart and in your spirit some areas where maybe you're struggling with ungrateful heart disease. Specifically in 4 areas today that maybe as I'm talking with you, maybe God is convicting you and making you aware of. Maybe when it comes to ungrateful heart disease, the first thing is material and financial. Is there an area of your life that you are ungrateful materially or financially? Where you say, my house not good enough, not big enough. My yard not big enough. My TV not large enough. My car not new enough. My grass is surely not green enough, right? Clothes not enough, job not enough, vacations not enough. Is there an area of your life materially and relationally that you are just ungrateful? How about relationally? I think I just said relationally, I meant materially and financially, but number two, relationally. How about when it comes to your parents, your grandparents, your spouse, your kids, your boyfriend, girlfriend, your friends, the people you do life with, that you're just ungrateful? People around me just aren't enough. I don't have enough people in my life. You know, if you have someone in your life, you're far better off than most people in our world who consider themselves being all alone. You know, most Americans, majority of Americans say that I don't have any real friends and nobody knows the real me. So if you have a friend, you have someone in your life to do life with, you're in a far better place than you could ever imagine. But we look around and we scroll and we see all these things that we think are happening in society and culture, and we look at what we don't have and we lose sight of what God is doing. How about circumstantial? When I talk about that, I mean my job, my body, my health. How many times are we so ungrateful? How about spiritual? I'm grateful for the church that we have. I think people are constantly looking for a perfect church, and I say, man, good luck. You know why the church is imperfect? Because you showed up. And I showed up. No church is perfect. So find a church, get plugged in, get grounded, connect, spread your wings, get involved, build relationships, use your gifts, use your talents, connect to others. People sit around, I don't have relationships. And I ask them, well, who do you have a relationship with? Well, no one. Well, is that everyone else's fault? Is that your fault? Have you gotten to a group? You connected to a team? You taking steps to get to know people? When nobody calls me, nobody reaches out, who do you call and reach out to? And people just give you blank stare. They don't like those questions. Sometimes I try to pull the Jesus and answer a question with a question. People are like, stop asking me questions. I just want to be mad. I want to find a reason to leave. I want to be upset. I want to blame others. It's the issue of the heart. How about the blessings and gifts that God has given you spiritually? How about the unanswered and even answered prayers we find ourselves so ungrateful for? So how do we take an ungrateful heart and turn it into a grateful heart? That's really the question today. How do we take this ungrateful, dead, stony heart that can easily just hoard so many things in life, and how do we make it a generous heart? How do we unblock the flow? What we have to begin to do is we have to begin to cultivate an attitude, a mindset of generosity. It's not something that comes natural. Something we have to teach ourselves. We're gonna have to learn, make a conscious decision to be grateful. So I asked you this question early on, this question of, will I be the one? And I wanna ask you this question because this is where we're gonna kind of stack these two things on top of each other. And it's this question right here, will I be the one who chooses a heart of gratitude daily? Because that's a choice. Will I choose before I attack each day to have a heart of gratitude daily? It's a daily decision, a daily choice we have to make every day. Literally every morning, am I gonna go to God with all the things that I don't have, all the things that I need and I want, or I'm gonna start my day in a posture of thankfulness and gratitude? You know, long before we were going into the series, you know, just through some series of events been going on in my own life, I found myself just beginning a habit, just in the craziness and chaos of my life over the last few months, of just really putting myself in a position of just thanking God for all that I do have. And my wife, Becky, will tell you this at night, like I lay down in bed at night and I'll reach over and I'll just kind of grab her, and she probably doesn't even know why I'm grabbing her. And what I'll do before I fall asleep is I'll just thank God for her. Thank you for Becky. Thank you that I have a spouse that loves you, that loves me, that loves our family. And I thank God for my kids. I thank God for this church. I thank God for my family. And I've been in this posture for the last couple months. Before I even go to bed, just God, I'm gonna list up all the things that I'm thankful for. And I've gotten myself in the morning, before my alarm goes off, I usually wake up like many of you, I'm kind of stirring, or maybe the alarm does go off. And before my feet hit the floor, I'll make sure that I say, God, thank you for today. Thank you again for my family. Thank you for the day. Because God, if I begin to attack this day, I know that my first inclination is to start to list off all the things that I don't have today. So what? I have to make it a conscious decision. I'm not trying to be the hero of any story. I'm having to force myself into a posture. God, I thank you for this church. God, I thank you for our staff. God, I thank you for their families. I thank you for those that show up and serve every single week, because if I don't, what I'll do is I'll start to list off all the stuff we don't have and all the things that are missing from my life and all the things that I think that I need. And so God, thank you for what I have. Look at the way Paul put it in Philippians chapter 4, verse 11 through 13. He says this, he says, I have what I have. I have what? Learn is being taught. That means it doesn't come natural. I have learned to be content whatever the circumstances. I know what it is to be in need, and I know what it is to have plenty. I have what I have. Come on, I have learned the secret of being content in every situation. I've learned, I have to teach myself how to be content. Now, verse 13 gets cherry picked, right? And it's an important verse because Paul is saying, you can do everything through Christ who gives you strength. But context, he's saying in this moment that God gives me the strength to be grateful, to have a heart of gratefulness in every season, because I don't have the strength to do it by myself. What I'm gonna do is I'm gonna list off all the things that I don't have. So I need the power of the Holy Spirit to remind me of God's goodness, of all that he's placed around me. I can do everything through him who gives me strength. It's learned. We got to teach ourselves. It's a decision, a daily choice we have to make daily. It's a hard decision because by nature, our sinful nature is ungrateful. We're dissatisfied people. We struggle with this. We'll struggle with it our whole life. So God, I'm going to begin the day by telling you how thankful I am. I'd been on many mission trips before, but in 2008, I had a chance to go on like what I would call like my first real foreign missions trip. I went to what's called the poorest country in the world. I went to Burkina Faso, Africa in 2008. Stepped off that plane, and in about 5 minutes of being in Burkina Faso, Africa, I was disgusted with myself. I was like, you are the most spoiled, rotten brat in the world. And all the things that you think that you need are just ridiculous. And the whole time I was there, I was just disgusted with my ungratefulness, disgusted with how spoiled I was. I came back determined to change the whole world of Americans who are all spoiled, right? You know what? It took me about 2 weeks to get back to normal. You know what I mean by that? To get back to a heart that was just never satisfied. To get back to a heart of taking for granted all the things that I have and beginning to get back into that posture, that negativity of all the things that I don't have, right? Why? Because there's this appetite that's within us that's never satisfied, that's never quite quenched, a thirst that we never quite can find what we're looking for. There's a hole in our soul that we're convinced is just filled with more of whatever. Ecclesiastes chapter 6, verse 9, it says, better what the eye sees than the roving of the appetite. You know what that means? Better to take note of what you actually see in front of you than this appetite of hungering and longing for more. It says better to take note, to see with your eyes what God has placed in front of you, what God has put into your hand, and to be thankful for it, than to wake up every day with this burning desire of more, 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 more. We said it this way many times at Hope Church: the fastest way to lose sight of what you have is to focus on what you don't have. And how many of us today have lost sight of what God has put in front of us because we're looking around at all the things that we don't have? Will I be the one today? Will I be the one today? Will I be the one today who chooses a heart of gratitude daily? Will I be the one today who chooses to let God change my heart? Are you willing to recognize today that you need a heart change? And not just today, but every single day. Are you willing to come back to God every day and say, God, change my heart? I hate my car. Did you know that somewhere around 3 to 5% of people in the world even have a car? We have like 3 or 4 or 5 or 6 or 7. We got disposable cars. We got more cars than people to drive them, but we hate our car. I mean, I just want to bring into perspective. Somewhere around 1 billion people in the world don't have access to clean drinking water. And we walk around, and I do this as well. I'm preaching to Tad today. We walk around so annoyed at how long it takes the hot water heater to get hot water back to my bathroom in the back of the house. Think about it for just a moment. Just how ungrateful we are, and we don't even realize how much we are so quick to complain. It's just our nature as Americans. Our first inclination, instead of praise or thankfulness, is to find something to complain about. It is. This is just what we do. We walk into anything and our first thought is, what's the negative criticism I can give about anything? What if we had a different mindset? What if we were constantly looking for an eye of a reason to be thankful and grateful? And we began to verbalize it and say it so much that it became part of who we are, that it permeated into our hearts, and our hearts became grateful. But in order for our heart to be grateful, that means our hearts have got to come to a place of realizing that God has already given you everything that you will ever need. But wait a minute. I got my eye there, and I got my eye there, and I got my eye that rung on the ladder. I got my eye on that house down the street, and I got my eye on that car. I got my house on that. And God's like, whoa, 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 whoa. Nothing wrong with any of those things. I'm not preaching against any of those things. But God's like, but do you really have what you, in other words, am I enough for you? Because if we directly connect God to the blessings that we have, that we've put out in front of him, and we say, God only loves me if I get there. God only loves me if I have that. God only loves me when we achieve that. God only loves me when success looks like this. And we're putting God in a box and we're saying, God, you only love me when it looks the way that I think it should. And God's like, was Jesus enough? Is eternity enough? Was rescuing you from hell enough? Was saving you from your sin enough? Was that enough? Yes, but I could really use. Yes. And it's no different than what we saw throughout the scriptures. We make it Jesus plus something else. It's Jesus plus fame. It's Jesus plus fortune. It's Jesus plus. And that's what Jesus came. He's like, it's God and God alone. It's Jesus plus nothing else equals everything. Is he everything? Are we grateful for that? I hate my body. How many of us? I hate my body. I wish I had a better body. I wish I didn't look this way. But what is the grateful mentality? Thank you that I'm healthy, that I'm alive. Thank you. Thank you. I need a better spouse. Ever said that out loud before? God, thank you that I have this person to do life with. And you know what, God, doing life with people isn't easy. But God, thank you that I have somebody to do life with. Instead of making this person who I want them to be, God, I just want them to be who you want them to be. Instead of me constantly reminding them they're not who I want them to be, I'm gonna speak life into them of the potential of who God wants them to be. When I see them living into who God wants them to be, I'm gonna acknowledge that, I'm gonna praise them for it. See, it just changes our focus. God, thank you for these kids that I prayed and begged you for, who are now teenagers who I wanna rip their heads off. God, I'm reminded that I'm thankful because the days are short. The years go by fast. And I remember when me and my brother left home watching my mom go through such a hard time, and she said, I would give anything to have a house of chaos again. Because it's so silent in this place. It's maddening. And there's been days I've prayed like, God, let these kids grow up and get out of my house. God, I'm thankful for my job. Maybe it's not the best job, but God, in this economy that's teetering on disaster, thank you that I have a job to provide for my family right now in this season. God, thank you for this car that gets me from point A to point B. It's not the ideal car, it's not my dream car, but God, thank you that I have this car. God, thank you for Jesus. At the end of the day, I deserved hell. I deserve hell. But God, you gave me Jesus for me in place of my sin. God, thank you that I don't got to go to hell. I got this place of eternity to look forward to. My hope, my faith is in something far greater than I could ever imagine. See, once you change your heart in realizing who God is and what God has done, once you realize that God has blessed you in so many ways, it changes your perspective. So God changed me. God changed my heart. Every week of this series, we reference this verse in Ezekiel chapter 36, verse 26. And God responds, he says, I'll give you a what? You pray, God, give me a heart. He says, I'll put a new spirit in you, and I'll take out your stony, stubborn heart, and I'll give you a tender, responsive heart. God, give me a new heart. A heart that's thankful, a heart that's grateful. Many of us watching this today, many of us here, if we are honest, we have lived ungrateful lives. And some of us need to ask God to forgive us. Some of us need in this season to ask God to give us a spiritual breakthrough in our hearts and our lives, to change our hearts, to help us cultivate a heart of gratitude. Listen, why do we wait to be grateful for something once it's been taken from us? Why do we do that? Why do we wait until the grandparents are gone, until the parents are gone, until we lose the job, until we lose the marriage, until the kids are gone to be grateful? Why do we wait for gratefulness to turn into regret? Isn't that so heartbreaking? That the things that we should be grateful for now turn into regret one day because we realize we weren't very thankful for them. Why don't we get on the front end? Why don't we go on the offensive and choose that we're going to be grateful people, that we're going to be grateful for what we do have, so at the end of our life, I don't have to look back and say, man, I wish I would have been more grateful to the people that mattered the most. I wish I would have been more grateful in my relationship with God. Because if I was more grateful in my relationship with God, then it would have impacted others. And I wouldn't have made it just about myself. I said this all throughout the series. When the world becomes your world, you've lost sight of God's big world. And we live in a world today that says me, 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 me. How do I change that heart? How do I change that blockage? How do I go against a heart of ungratefulness, a heart of greed? Is I got to choose to go on the offensive. That's why we said last week that generosity is the antidote to greed. Thankfulness, gratefulness is the antidote to an ungrateful heart. God, I'm thankful. Will you be thankful today? I want to pray for you right now. I want to pray that maybe you would pray during this time that God would give you a new heart, that God would change the way that you see life, change all the things that you're chasing after, that you're desiring, and that you learn to be grateful, not just in this moment, but far beyond this moment. That you begin to live a daily life of letting God permeate deep within your heart and soul. Learn to be grateful and content in every season. Like the words of Paul, I've learned, I've taught myself, I've disciplined myself to be grateful. I can't do it by myself. But God, you give me the strength through your Holy Spirit to be grateful when I cannot be grateful. God, today, God, wherever we are today watching this message, and God, for those in this room, God, I pray that you would just, God, break our hearts. That we would see today that we live with such an entitlement mentality that God, we don't even realize that it creeps into our spiritual lives. We start expecting things out of you and from you. And God, what we do is we close off our heart to you, because when we don't get our way, God, we begin to believe that you're not good and you're not true and you don't answer prayers. God, it becomes a heart blockage of, God, you being able to do stuff in our life, and really, God, it is an offense against your very heart and nature. God, you're a good God, and we've said throughout the series, if you never gave us anything more than Jesus, it is more than enough. God, rip our hearts to shreds today. God, break our hearts for you. Maybe for some of us today, it's going to be an opportunity to just come before you and ask for forgiveness over maybe an entitlement mentality we've been living with for a while. We've been holding everybody else hostage, blaming anything and everything, when really it just begins in us. Maybe for some of us today, we've never received, God, really a new heart in you, a new beginning, a fresh start. We never received through your son, Jesus, who came to die for our selfish, ungrateful hearts, our sinful hearts, to give us a brand new heart, a fresh start, who went to a cross for us, who died for us, who went into a tomb for us, who defeated death and sin for us, who was resurrected from the grave from us, all so that we could have a new life, a new beginning in you, not in ourselves. And maybe today is more than just a head knowledge of what you've done, but it's a new heart beginning in us. God, work in our lives, move in our hearts. God, change us from the inside out. May we head even to this next season, God, as we move into December, God, with a more grateful heart. An eye to be able to see needs, to be generous, to be grateful, to serve others, to use the gifts you've given us, to use whatever we have, God, at your disposal, so the world might know who you are. God, we love you today. In Christ Jesus' name we pray. Amen, amen.
Well, thank you so much for joining us today. We hope that you gain something from this content, that it helps you to follow, to grow, and to live for Jesus. We drop new content just like this every Monday morning, so we want to invite you back. And the best way to do that is to follow, like, and subscribe on whatever platform you're watching to stay connected to everything we have going on here at Hope Church.